and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 5, Episode 19, The Fire. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well out there. I'm doing just fine. I'm sort of boring, to be honest. I don't really have a lot to banter about today. I'm sure some of you are probably happy about that. I feel like sometimes banter on a lot of podcasts can get a little bit drawn out and boring and, kind of tangent-y. And I know I can do that too. I'm not innocent of that, but I hope and I do try and make the banter as interesting as possible. At any rate, I don't really have any banter today. I'm excited to meet up with some friends later. A couple of my Detroit improv brothers are coming. They have a layover in Denver, so I'm going to meet them for a late lunch in a little bit here. So I'm trying to get this recording done so I can meet up with my good pals. And that's about it. Why don't we just get into this episode? The synopsis for The Fire is as follows. Kramer dates Elaine's annoying coworker, Toby. On their date, Toby heckles Jerry during his nightclub act. Jerry returns the favor by heckling her at her office, causing her to run into the street and have her pinky toe severed by a street sweeper. Kramer commandeers a bus to rescue the toe. Toby's loss leads her to win a promotion over Elaine. George reveals his cowardice when a fire breaks out at a birthday party for his girlfriend's young son. This episode was written by Larry Charles. In fact, this was Larry Charles' last episode of Seinfeld that he was involved in. He went on to pursue other writing adventures, his own sitcom, a couple of shows, in fact, and he's gone on to do great things. But I thought that was interesting. This was his last episode of Seinfeld that he wrote. All right, we start out in Pendant Publishing. Kramer, Elaine, and her coworker, Toby, are all in Elaine's office going over photos for Kramer's coffee table book. Now, Toby is going nuts. Just really, really great. Everything. She is so blown away by, first of all, the idea for this book, all of these coffee table photos. I love this one. It's like, put some coffee on me. The hotter, the better. Oh, like she's just over the top. Now, the actress who plays Toby is Veanne Cox. Veanne has been in a ton of shows with like bit parts here and there. I recently saw her and very much enjoyed her in the last season of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Highly recommend. Although, it started out really strong. It's kind of gone a little bit downhill in the last season. Anyway, but I'd have to do a totally different podcast for that. At any rate, Veanne Cox had a role in that last season. And oh my gosh, as soon as she came on screen, I'm like, it's Toby. She's so great in Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And she's also a very accomplished theater actress and was actually nominated for a Tony at one point. I love her. I love her as Toby. I love this character. Like the character itself is already great, but then in the hands of Veanne Cox, it's just perfect. Perfect. I love Toby. I love everything about this character. If any of you saw my video on TikTok, the Hot and Heavy TikTok, I kind of said like, oh my God, this is a great Elaine episode. And as I've watched it, I'm kind of going, well, it's not a strong Elaine episode in the sense that, well, I'll get more into that later. I'll get into all my notes. But this is just what I should have said in that video. I guess my point is this is a very strong female-led episode, which, I love too. I want as much Elaine as possible. But this, with Veanne Cox as Toby, wow, a lot of comedic female power in this episode. And I just love it. All right, back to the scene. Elaine is clearly annoyed with this woman. She is just too much. She actually tries to get them to leave. I got some work to do. And then Kramer comes up with the idea to have the book itself become a coffee table. And that just sends Toby through the roof. Oh, that's such a great idea. Really, really great. My take on this scene, super fun opening scene. I love that it starts in Elaine's office, something that we don't see very often. Usually we're in Monk's or at Jerry's apartment. So it really grabs your attention when it's not in either of those like usual locations to start the episode. And what a treat to see Elaine and Kramer in a scene together. I know Toby's there too, but like just Elaine and Kramer together, that's not a typical combination. And I'm kind of glad we're bringing back the whole Kramer coffee table book. We haven't heard about that in a few episodes. And I mean, kind of what I alluded to before, Veanne Cox just takes over this scene with her portrayal of Toby. You see right away what we're dealing with. I mean, this is really establishment of character scene. Like of course we need to know she works at Pendant, she's working on Kramer's book, but Toby is the central part of this episode. And even though it's called The Fire, it has nothing to do with Toby, which I think is kind of weird. I really think this episode should have been called The Toby. But yes, we're getting introduced to this character Toby and what Elaine is dealing with her. And it's just such a delight to see such a strong establishment of character right up front in the episode. And we really understand what Elaine's struggle is going to be, throughout the episode, and some great face acting here from JLD. All right, next we're at Jerry's apartment. Elaine is venting to Jerry about Toby, doing an impression of her. Oh, this coffee table says, put some coffee on me. Oh, she wishes she could throw some coffee right in her face. She says it's like working with a contestant from The Price is Right. And Elaine does a fantastic impression of a person running down the aisle, something we've all seen on The Price is Right. Jerry isn't too invested in this story. He needs her opinion on a joke that he's writing about how men hunt, women nest, remote, blah, blah, blah. She says, yeah, it's good. I don't know. Well, Jerry thinks it's gold. Well, I don't know about gold. Anyway, she's like, you know what? I don't want to give my opinion about your jokes. It's too much pressure. Well, he wants to do well because at his next show, he's being reviewed. Kramer enters and of course has to start talking about Toby. How about that Toby? He tells Jerry, you need to meet this woman. She's just brimming with positivity. Elaine can't even take it. Oh, please. Well, Kramer tells Jerry he's going to bring Toby to his comedy show. And that she's a great laugher, right, Elaine? Oh, yes, she's a great laugher, Jerry. Really, really great. Jerry asks if Kramer would want to sit with George and Robin. And we find out that George is dating one of the waitresses from the comedy club and that she's got a kid. My take on the scene, I love the segue from the opening scene where Elaine is in the office, clearly holding in her annoyance. And then we go right into this scene where she's venting to Jerry about it. It's really well done. I will never tire of Elaine doing the impression of the Price is Right contestant. Such a perfect way to describe Toby. And I always love it's that physical comedy that JLD is so good at, like just that running motion, that look on her face. It's so funny. No surprise that Jerry doesn't care, and Elaine returning the favor of not caring about his joke. That's a great response. You can so just feel that level of annoyed Elaine after Kramer is gushing about Toby. I love that. Oh, please. It's so fantastic. The way she says it, her face, the physicality, just quintessential JLD greatness. All right, next we are at Monk's. George is with his girlfriend, Robin, and her kid is under the table, wreaking havoc. The table is shaking. He's apparently sucking down equal packets, and this is all stressing George out. The actress who plays Robin is Melanie Chartoff. Now, Melanie, I know her best from a show called Parker Lewis Can't Lose. It's from the early 90s. She played Miss Musso, the very strict and funny principal from that show. But she actually came to prominence in the early 80s on a show called Fridays, which also starred Michael Richards and Larry David. She's also an accomplished stage actor and voice actor. And I think she's good as Robin. The character is pretty flat. They just kind of needed a girlfriend for George who had a kid to serve this plot, but she's fine. Just knowing how funny she was in Parker Lewis Can't Lose, I just know like how much range she has. Plus she was in a sketch show, so obviously she has a lot more range. But you know what? She got this role, and I like her as Robin. All right, back to the scene. She's planning a birthday party for her son, and George, he's just like, this is way too elaborate with catering and entertainment. And then we flash back to George's 7th birthday where his parents are badgering him to blow out the candles. Stop it, Frank! You're killing him! The scene ends with what I can only assume is Robin's son biting George's leg under the table. I don't know what's going on. All All right, next we're at the pendant office. Toby enters Elaine's office to chat. Elaine's clearly not interested, but engages with her. How are you doing, Toby? And of course, she's great, just great, really great. And then Toby tells Elaine the news about Bob Rosen, that he's going to Knopf to be a vice president. Well, this really interests Elaine because now there's an opening for senior editor. Toby says Lippman is thinking about promoting someone in-house. Whoa, she's got Elaine's attention now. Toby then tells Elaine, well, maybe it'll be you. You really deserve it. Lippman really respects you. You've got seniority. Elaine is so flattered. And then she realizes she should probably return the adoration. Well, it could be you. No, really. Stranger things have happened. This excites Toby. That's all it takes. Wow, senior editor. I'd like that. Elaine warns her, don't get your hopes up. Nope, it's too late. Thank you, Elaine. Thank you. My take on this scene, what a treat to see these strong comedic females of the episode in this scene together with no one else. I think that's such a treat. It's not something we see very often. And Veanne Cox has so much to shine here with so much range in one scene. We sort of see the subdued Tony when she comes in, a bit more excited after Elaine asks her how she's doing. She's kind of like sitting there and then, oh, I'm great, really great. It's just, I love that transition. And then we see kind of the fishing for compliments, Toby, like so many emotions. And then my favorite emotion, that sudden turn to kind of a dark Toby. Me, senior editor, I'd like that. I mean, oh my gosh, what a fun little glimpse into how dark she can get. I wish we kind of wish we got to see more of that. And then obviously the optimistic Toby after Elaine tells her, could be you about the senior editor position and the way she leaves. It's so much fun. This is small, but I love that little kind of head motion she does when she says, thank you, Elaine. Thank you. Sometimes something as little as that little head bob can really punch up just a simple moment. It wouldn't have been the same if she just kind of kept her head motionless. I don't know. There's something about that little motion. And that's why, again, I haven't gone off on this in a while, so just let me have my moment again. Physicality. I'm not talking about necessarily physical comedy with obvious things that are funny physically. I'm talking about just being in your body and just delivering your performance with your whole body. And that's kind of what Veanne Cox does here with that little thank you, Elaine. Thank you. This little head bop. I'm doing it, but obviously this is an audio medium. You can't see me doing it. And I'm sorry that I keep doing it, but watch it. Watch the episode again and see what she does. That's what I'm talking about. Now, JLD, of course, is a master at that. I've talked a lot about JLD's physical prowess, her physicality as she acts. This type of physicality isn't necessarily funny, but it just adds to the comedy. All right, next we are at the comedy theater. I believe it's the Improv. And Jerry enters and talks to Ronnie Kay, who is a prop comic. And he does this kind of nostril bit. well, it's not a bit. I'm sorry. He doesn't do bits. He's a prop comic. Kramer and Toby enter. Jerry is introduced to her and her extreme enthusiasm. She, of course, is so excited. She makes Jerry feel her goosebumps and screams when he does. She's never been to a comedy club before. And Jerry makes a little crack about, they're serving brewed decaf now. Oh, she laughs. You're so funny. No, you'll have a good time, I swear. Oh, I believe you. I believe you. Oh, he's so funny. Kramer says, well, what about me? What about you? I'm kidding. You're funny too. I love to laugh. Jerry, sorry. I just love this so much. I know I'm reenacting a lot of it, but it's just because it's so good. Jerry tells them, you should go in and get some good seats. And Toby does this big head joke and just laughs at her own joke, of course. And Kramer says, yeah, have a good show, buddy. Oh, we'll make sure it's a good show. And then they turn the corner and then Toby turns back and grabs Kramer. Oh, he's so great. This is so great. I'm so excited. And then we cut to Jerry's performance and Toby's in the audience just getting so over the top with every reaction. Oh, really, really, that is so true. And then she boos him and hisses him over his remote joke, the one that he had been practicing. She did not care for it. We cut to Jerry pacing in the bar after the show. Kramer enters. He's so pissed. What the hell's wrong with her? Toby enters and lays into her, and she just thought it was part of the show, and that's how she expresses herself, and kind of accuses him of being weak. How are you going to make it in this business if you can't take it? And then Kramer and Toby storm out. Just really quick, I know there's no Elaine in this scene, so I'm not going to really break it down, but oh my God, this is just another brilliant part of the Toby character and this episode. Like, the trying too hard. Okay, I know I'm not a hugely famous stand-up comic like Jerry Seinfeld, but even in my amateur experience as a sketch comic, an improv comic, I mean, the shift that happens with people when they find out you're in comedy and they go and they try to be funny in front of you to impress you somehow. I mean, I've had experience with this, and this Toby example in this episode is just perfect because she's like, well, I'm around funny people. I'm around this funny guy. I'm going to have to show him how funny I am. And it's just such a perfect little like example of what a lot of us in comedy go through. It's if it's not like, hey, tell us a joke, like as soon as they find out you're a comedian, it's like they amp up their own, what they think is funny about themselves. And it's just an interesting thing. I've had friends with me who aren't in comedy, who've been around me when that's happened. And they're like, how do you deal with people doing that? I mean, it could be anything from like an Uber driver to just someone at a party, like being introduced to you. And then they find out you do comedy and this weird energy comes out sometimes. And it's just, it's not ill meaning or anything. Like people are just trying to like relate to you, but it's just so funny. Like, I don't think a doctor has to deal with that. I think doctors have to deal with different things like, hey, I got this going on and my, my shoulder hurts or whatever. But, which, George does, can't disturb the delicate genius. But like, I don't think there's another profession where someone tries to kind of show the skills of your profession to you instantly. Maybe there is, enlighten me if there is, guys, tell me about it. But I love that they showed that in this episode because it just happens all the time. Even in my own experience doing local, regional theater, comedy, improv and sketch comedy. It's just a very interesting social tick almost that people have. All right, next we are at the birthday party. George is harassing the clown at the party. He's very upset that his name's Eric the clown, has no idea who Bozo the clown is. And finally, Eric is just so annoyed, like, why are you hassling me? This is just a gig. This isn't my life. And he tells George, you should forget about it. You're hung up on a clown from the 60s, man. And side note, I'm sure a lot of you know this, but the clown is played by Jon Favreau, and this is his first TV appearance, and he's so good. I love him as Eric the clown. Oh, it's so great. George meets Robin's mother, and of course he's charming as usual. We know that George really prides himself on how good he is with the mothers. The actress who plays Robin's mother is, I love this name, Patience Cleveland. She started acting in the late 50s and made many television appearances throughout her life, including appearances in The Jeffersons, General Hospital, ER, amongst many others. Patience passed away in 2004. Her brother, I thought this was kind of interesting trivia, her brother Rick Cleveland wrote on the shows 6 Feet Under, The West Wing, and Mad Men, 3 of my top shows. And I think she's totally adorable as Robin's mother. She's the perfect little old lady. Back to the scene, George smells something burning. He goes over to the kitchen and sees that there's a fire! Fire! He yells and pushes past all of the women and children to get out of the apartment. Next, we see the street in front of Robin's place, and we see George getting some oxygen in an ambulance when Eric, the clown, and the other party goers just rush at him because he left them to die. Then we cut to a little bit later on the street where George is trying to defend his actions. He was trying to be a leader, and the pushing people to the ground was actually a safety precaution. He goes on, and no one feels any better about what he did. And a fireman comes up to him and says, "How do you live with yourself? It's not easy." All right, next we're at Monk's. George tells Jerry that Robin doesn't want to see him anymore. Did you knock her over too, or just the kids? No, her too. And Jerry, of course, just thinks it's ridiculous. So you think women and children first is somewhat of an antiquated notion. Somewhat. Yeah, and you know what? She should be praising me for treating everyone as equals. And this is one of my favorite lines of the series. Well, maybe when she's released from the burn unit, perhaps she'll see it differently. Perhaps. Then Jerry shows George his awful review in the magazine. Whoa, he really does a number on you. George convinces Jerry to heckle Toby at her office, like all the comedians threaten to do. It doesn't take much. Jerry gets convinced. Yeah, he wants to do it. I'll go down to where she works. All right, next we're at the pendant office. We see it in action. Jerry walks up to Toby's office doorway and starts heckling her, making fun of her sandals. Well, she's not having it. She's very busy. Oh, is this disruptive? You find it difficult to work with someone interrupting? Then she threatens to call security. Security! Jerry throws her line back in her face. I don't know how you're going to make it in this business if you can't take it. Boo! Boo! It's the Jerry Seinfeld. Boo! Well, Toby's had enough. Just as Kramer approaches, Toby pushes past the both of them to leave. Kramer goes after her. And then we see a shot of the city and we can hear Toby yell, "My pinky toe!" And we see a close-up of Kramer in shock. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Kramer is reprimanding Jerry for heckling Toby at the office. George enters and hears about Toby having an accident after running away from Jerry, and a street sweeper came by and severed her pinky toe. Kramer then regales them of how he saved the toe by putting it into a Cracker Jack box on ice after Toby left, and hopped on a bus, staved off a gunman, drove the bus after the driver passed out, threw the mugger out of the bus at the next stop. I mean, people kept ringing the bell. Anyway, the toe is back on Toby's foot, and George is so inspired by Kramer's heroism. All right, next we're at the pendant office. Elaine's coworkers are telling her what happened to Toby and that they'll really have to treat her with some compassion. You know how sensitive she is. Yeah, right. Elaine's so annoyed. And then Toby arrives on crutches and goes into Elaine's office for some reason. Why she doesn't go to her own office. Everyone's doting on her. Oh, they're telling her they're family. If she needs anything, just ask. And the crowd is just doting and crowding around her. They push Elaine down without even noticing it. My take on this scene, is not too much to add here. It's pretty straightforward. I do like, I don't know if any of you guys noticed this, but Elaine is trying, as soon as Toby comes around the corner and enters her office on crutches, she's smiling and she's trying to participate in being, supportive of her. And then it's such a fun moment when she's starting to get pushed over and she falls to the ground. No one even notices. It's just kind of a physical representation of how Toby is taken over everything. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. We find out that Toby got the promotion over Elaine. Jerry asks why, and Elaine says, "I'll tell you why. Because of her pinky toe. That's why." She thinks Lippman felt so sorry for her. Elaine then goes off on the pinky toe. Sure, it's cute, but what is it? It's useless. It's got that nail that's just impossible to cut. What do we even need it for? Elaine, that's the one that goes wee, wee, wee all the way home. Why don't you shut the Kramer opens his door and is all excited. Did you hear about Toby's promotion? Elaine has to remind him, I work there, remember? When I guess Toby's first order of business is to get Kramer's book published as soon as possible. Oh, wonderful. Kramer says she always kept a smile on her face throughout this whole ordeal. Of course, she's deranged. My take on this scene, it's not too much here except to resolve the whole Toby storyline. As I was thinking about this, what happens to Elaine here, I think we can add this to the list of ways these idiots that Elaine she's chosen to be friends with, how they've screwed her over once again. Let's think about it. If Kramer didn't take Toby to see Jerry, she wouldn't have heckled him, and then Jerry wouldn't have gone over to her office, and then her pinky toe wouldn't have been severed, and Elaine may have gotten that promotion. Ugh, these guys always screw Elaine over. I do always laugh at the part where Elaine says, "Yes, I heard, Kramer. I work there. Remember?" Oh, funny. All right, next we're at the comedy club. Jerry tells Ronnie K about how he convinced the critic to come back and write another article. Ronnie is telling Jerry how just impressed he is that he went and heckled Toby. You're like Rosa Parks. Jerry gets called to the stage, so he exits. George then enters and tries to talk to Robin, says he's a changed man. We cut to Jerry's performance. He's killing, doing material about Bozo the Clown. And so the set is going well. Back to the bar in the club, Robin's really not sure about getting back together with George. She's going to have to think about it. She exits with a tray of drinks, and then right then, Ronnie K pulls a gun on the bartender. We cut back to Jerry's set. He's giving the men hunt, women nest punchline, which goes over very well. But then we hear George screaming, "He's got a gun! He's got a gun!" Well, mayhem ensues, and the crowd runs out in a mad panic. Robin comes over and tells George it's Ronnie K, the prop comic. I didn't recognize you. And he says, nostrils bigger. Jerry comes out. George, can I have a word? All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. Boo! Boo! Heckling. It's a performer's worst nightmare, but it does happen. How would you handle it? Hi, I'm Toby, founder of the Heckling Bootcamp, an intensive series of really, really great workshops where I train performers to cope with heckling. What makes me an expert on heckling, you ask? Well, I used to be a heckler. That's right. One night I heckled a comedian during one of his most important shows. Instead of just letting it go, he decided to come to my office and heckle me. And I learned a really, really important lesson. He was a big old baby. Well, after his office heckling tantrum, I knew it was my life mission to help other big man babies like him learn how to handle the heckling that will inevitably happen to them. Toby helped me so much, but it wasn't easy. During my first class, I wasn't sure I could keep going. So my wife, she got mad at me the other day. Oh, really? Yes, I bet she did. Oh, yeah. Oh, she did. Yeah, okay, anyway, I told her I was going to pick up the groceries, right? You know? Oh, groceries. Oh, yes. Husbands do that. Yes. Oh, yeah. So anyway, what'd you get? The wrong eggs? Maybe low-fat? Shut up, bitch! Okay. Now, you see what you did wrong there? By the end of the boot camp, I was a changed man. I learned how to handle myself. Did you ever notice the laziest people have the darkest jeans? I mean, what's up with that? Oh, really? Yeah, darker the better. Yeah, thanks, lady. If I needed your help, I would have called you at 976 loud and unfunny. Oh, bravo! That was really, really great. Great job. You handled that well. If you need help dealing with hecklers, just visit my website, reallyreallygreat.toby, and sign up. The Heckling Bootcamp. You gotta learn how to take it to make it. And we're back. All right. So in the extras for this episode, in the notes about nothing, there were a couple things I wanted to mention. There is a JLD quote about how she voiced Princess Atta in the 1998 Pixar film A Bug's Life. Quote, "I don't really mind bugs. They've never really freaked me out, so I'm happy to portray them as the friendly beasts that they are for the most part. You know how people look like certain animals? I am definitely an ant. That's probably why I got the gig." I don't remember if I've seen A Bug's Life. Because I think there was a movie called Ants that came out around the same time, and I remember thinking that was odd. So in 1998, I would have been 19 or 20. So I don't think a Pixar movie was at the top of my list to see. So I don't think I saw this movie, but I liked how she says, "I'm definitely an ant." Okay. And something else that was interesting in the extras, apparently Molly Shannon was almost cast as Toby. So I thought that was interesting. That would have been such a different energy. I think Molly Shannon's fantastic. And of course, we will see her later in season 8 as Elaine's coworker who doesn't move her arms when she walks. But for this character, I think she would have brought a different energy. And I don't know. It's just hard for me not to imagine Toby as she's played by Veanne Cox. But yeah, I love Molly Shannon, and I'm glad that she got a chance to play another character, which I'll get to it when we are in season 8, but man, I do love her performance as well. All right, now it's time to open Greg's sack lunch. Greg is one of our most devoted contributors to this podcast, and he now has his own segment, Greg's Sack Lunch. So now it's time to open Greg's sack. I love the scene where Elaine is first describing Toby to Jerry and then everything after with Kramer. And then the telling of what's up with George just sets up the whole episode so perfectly. JLD is on fire here as she's so pissed off and randomly, maniacally looking for food in Jerry's cabinets just because someone she works with is too positive. She literally says she wants to throw scalding hot coffee in her face, and Elaine in a later season might have just done it as she gets harder and harder over time. We get a rare Elaine, Kramer, Jerry combined storyline with this deranged woman. Actually, my favorite non-Elaine scene is when Jerry comes to Toby's office and boos her. It's so petty and vindictive. There's something so rich in the spiteful act of revenge that appeals to me. Some people do need to be taken down a notch. My favorite line actually might be when Dom Herrera's character says, "Jerry, you're like Rosa Parks." I love all of those comments. I definitely agree. This kind of is a little bit different. I think it's a little more annoying for Elaine, but just in like the Raincoats episode that I just covered in the last couple of pod episodes, she couldn't understand why Aaron, her boyfriend, was being so nice to the Seinfelds, like just too nice. And here she can't stand Toby because she's too positive. Now, of course, Toby is just also obnoxious with her voice and like her laugh and everything else. So I don't disagree, Greg, that some people do need to be taken down a notch because being overly positive is one thing, but then combining that with just being kind of obnoxious with everything, like your voice and everything, it is too much. I've certainly come across people where it's like, oh my gosh, I should not dislike this person, but it's like, that's the only way you can say it. They're too much. They're just a lot to handle. All right. Next in Greg's sack is his favorite Elaine moment. He says, Elaine doesn't get a ton of moments in different scenes of this episode, but the few scenes she's in are bountiful. Ooh, good word. Back to the first scene with her mocking Toby's personality, I love when she does the Price is Right contestant run, and it makes me laugh every single time. I'm with Elaine on this. Toby is way too over the top, and the actress who plays her so annoyingly does a great job, even if, to some extent, is totally unbelievable. I can't quite say if this actress was excellent or awful, or maybe she was just excellent at being awful. You would think more people at Elaine's office would be on her side in regards to this completely annoying coworker, but they seem to be more on Toby's side. I will say I hate that moment where they all pile into Elaine's office pushing her as they go. I think on paper that played better than in actuality because it is kind of just a cheap little button to the scene to give JLD something physical to do. I don't love it. They could have come up with something better here to demonstrate the rallying around Toby with Elaine as the odd one out. Gosh, I guess I didn't really think much about that as far as like knocking Elaine down. Like I said, I sort of saw it like as a symbolic physical gesture of what is happening to Elaine because of Toby. I guess that's maybe like a little deep way to think about it. But yeah, I think I don't disagree. They probably could have come up with something a little bit better, but I don't know. I think it's fun. I like, she fall. And then I've always noticed this too. Like Elaine's office is a hole. Like, what is she, a hoarder? Like she's got so many things. Like she doesn't get hurt. We know this because she falls on the pile of magazines that she has like that fall with her from her like back credenza thing. Like what is going on? Why is Elaine so messy? Okay, well, I mean, I see you're debating here about whether Veanne Cox is a good actress or she's just annoying. No, I think she is excellent at being awful. And as I've gone on and on about her this whole episode, but I think she's fantastic. I think also it's not easy to pull this off. I mean, it's such an over the top, very broad character in the sense of like, we don't see that too much. We haven't seen that too much up until this point in Seinfeld, where the characters are just crazy over the top. So this is our first taste at that. I think it works so well because we see the different levels of it. It's not held at one level, the over the top level the whole time, which is why I love the scene with Toby and Elaine by themselves in her office, because we sort of see the subdued version of Toby. And then we see her get angry with Jerry, and we see, so we do see different levels. We need to see like the peaks and valleys of every character. So while for the most part, she's really, really great, like we see that, I think it works because we see different shades of her. Like even when Jerry is heckling her, she's just rolling her eyes and she's like, oh my gosh, So I think it works for that reason. All right. The last thing in Greg's sack is his scene swap idea. He says, besides the scene redo I just mentioned, there is nothing here plot-wise that I would change. If anything, I would just maybe add Elaine to a scene or two that she isn't in. George's whole story with both the fire and the clown cracks me up so much I can't take anything away from it. We could have maybe used Elaine in the scene where George is recapping what happened with the fire to Jerry at the diner. While Jerry sarcastically commented, Elaine could have been the one to directly call George despicable. She could have also been at Jerry's comedy show with Kramer and Toby, kind of sitting back in the I told you so way to Jerry when Toby was heckling him. Kramer's story about the mugger on the bus seems like a forced way to give Michael Richards something to actually do in this episode. But he does such a great job telling a story, I can't even knock its inclusion. All in all, I really do like this episode a lot. Yeah, it's interesting you mention Michael Richards' monologue about what happens on the bus when he's going to the hospital. Originally, they were supposed to flash back to scenes from the bus as he's telling the story. But apparently they filmed his monologue first and they got all of the laughs they needed out of that they just canceled doing that altogether. I mean, they had cast it, the mugger, the driver, everything, but they were like, I don't think we need it, which I think was the right decision. Kind of unpopular opinion. I don't know. I know this is revered as such a great iconic moment, with this monologue. I don't know why it doesn't do it for me. I do like the moment where now I'm driving the bus and he does a little like hip swivel. I think that's really cute. And I do like when Jerry's like, you kept making all the stops. Well, people wouldn't stop ringing the bell. Yeah, I do like that. Okay. So I guess I kind of like it, but I don't think it's as like amazing as people think it is. Anyway, I actually didn't have a scene swap at all for this episode because I agree with you, Greg. I love George's storyline. I think they really did do a better job with this episode. And I think it's a testament to Larry Charles, who I think was one of the best writers of the series. He knew how to balance out stories. He also has always given, for the most part, I think there's an exception here and there, but like he's always given Elaine really good things to work with in the episodes he's written. So yeah, I mean, I didn't either, but anyway, I'll get to that in a little bit. Thank you so much, Greg, for contributing these ideas and thoughts. And now it's time to close Greg's sack lunch. All right, moving on to my favorite Elaine moment. I'm going to make it quick. It's got to be the Price is Right impression. I love it. Now that's an iconic moment I'm on board with because I think she does such a funny job with that. And my final notes. I enjoy this episode a lot. And while Elaine, she doesn't get a ton of the comedy here, that's not to say she doesn't get any. She gets a good amount, but it's a Toby-centric episode. So I love that we get to see a strong comedic female guest star sort of take over like most of the plots of the show. It's great. What a gift to this guest star for Veanne Cox. Like, I just like think about like these these people who come in for just one episode and they just run away with most of the story. That's such a gift, especially in a show like Seinfeld. And I know this is an Elaine podcast, but it's also, I've made it clear too that this podcast is about highlighting the female talent on Seinfeld. And Veanne Cox as Toby is a highlight for me for the entire series. I mean, part of me wishes she came back every now and then, but then the sensible part recognizes that she needed to be a one and done. And it's sort of a mystery what happens to Toby because, as many of us know, Elaine does end up getting a promotion at the end of this season. So maybe Toby ends up leaving Pendant Publishing, which opens up the spot for Elaine. Maybe she gets fired after Kramer bombs on Regis and Kathy Lee. I don't know. We can ponder that later. Now, broken record time. I would have loved more Elaine. I think Greg's suggestions of, maybe involving her more, maybe at the comedy club, maybe with George at the diner, all fun ideas. But, what JLD does get in this episode, she does a beautiful job with. And since Veanne Cox is just a master as Toby, I'm not going to complain. It's another strong female actress who gets so much of the comedy in this episode. So I'm going to put my complaints in a little sack, mister. And I think that's all I can say about The Fire. Thank you so much for listening. Now, please remember to follow Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Bennis podcast on social. On TikTok, it is at Elaine Bennis Podcast. On Instagram, it's at Hot Heavy Elaine. And also you can email me if you have any questions or comments about just Elaine in general, maybe the episode is coming up. Email me at elainepodcast@gmail.com. That's elainepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you again for listening, and I will see you next time.